My boyfriend of 5 years was diagnosed with stomach cancer. To pay for his medical treatment, I sold the heirloom my mother left me and took on 3 jobs all by myself. Until one day when I was working part-time in a bar and overheard him talking about me with others. Winnie? She's just a plaything for me to toy with when I'm bored. Giving her hope and then pushing her into the abyss, isn't it rather interesting? I didn't cry or make a scene, nor did I rush in to question him. Instead, I packed my luggage that very night and flew back to my hometown. I heard later that Jason, the young master of the Hong Kong circle, turned the whole city upside down with red eyes yet still couldn't find his little girl. 1 second before I pushed open the door of the private room, I was secretly pleased that I could earn several hundred yuan from this job. However, when I saw Jason sitting in the middle of the booth surrounded by a group of young masters, my heart sank suddenly. At this moment, he was dressed in a suit and tie, exuding an innate nobility all over. He didn't look like the penniless boyfriend who used to pester me for kisses at the door at all. I looked at him again and again uncertainly, but then I heard the charming laughter of the woman lying in his arms. Master Joe, haven't you had enough of the drama of Cinderella falling in love with the Prince Charming? What's so good about that Winnie? Is she worth your spending so many years playing such a boring game? The woman's words were frivolous and full of disdain. Jason didn't answer. There was a faint smile hidden in his eyes. He lifted the woman's chin and bent down to kiss her. The private room was unusually quiet, making this kiss seem particularly amorous and ambiguous. The woman's delicate panting flooded into my ears like a tide, and a stabbing pain like countless needles pricking spread across my heart. Master Joe? There are people watching. Why don't you come to my place tonight? You can do whatever you want with me. The lust in Jason's eyes faded away. He pinched the woman's face and said jokingly, "This is the biggest difference between you and her. She's so obedient, not as coquettish as you. You can't live without a man." The woman didn't feel offended at all. Instead, she laughed heartily. "Oh, you're so hate. Don't say that about me." My nose tingled with sadness. I quickly lowered my head and swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. At this moment, I finally confirmed that the man in front of me was indeed Jason, my boyfriend of 5 years. 3 months ago, Jason had red eyes and proposed to break up with me because he didn't want to burden me. "Winnie, maybe we should break up. I don't want to drag you down." At that instant, I felt as if the sky and the earth were spinning. Before I could say a word, tears uncontrollably streamed down my face. "Why do you want to break up? What happened?" I tightly grasped his arm and looked up at him in disbelief, until he took out the stomach cancer diagnosis report. When I saw the words, "mid-stage stomach cancer," clearly written on it, my world seemed to collapse in an instant, and my voice was choked with sobs. How could this happen? Jason didn't say a word and just hugged me tightly, feeling the moisture on my neck. I subconsciously wanted to look up. Don't look, Winnie. I don't want you to see me in such a mess, and I don't want to burden you. I'll move out tomorrow. Let me hold you tightly one more time before I die." His voice trembled slightly, carrying a sense of helplessness and despair. I was so angry that my eyes turned red. I slapped his back hard and said with a sob, "Don't talk nonsense. Don't mention death. I'll stay with you. Everything will be okay." After that, we fell into silence. The cost of Jason's surgery was over 500,000 yuan. For me, a struggling writer with a monthly income of only 3,000 yuan, it was an astronomical figure. Unless I sold my liver or kidneys. After a long while, he let go of me somewhat dejectedly, his voice low and hoarse. "It's okay. It just makes my heart ache when I think that I won't be able to accompany you in the future, Winnie. The only thing I can't let go of is you." Looking at his fragile expression, I forced a smile and comforted him gently. "It's okay. I'll figure something out." After returning to the room, I opened my account balance and found that even after scraping together everything, there was less than 5,000 yuan. I sat quietly on the bed, staring blankly at the real estate certificate in my hand. This was left to me by my parents and the only thing that could be exchanged for money. On one side was my boyfriend whom I had loved for 5 years, and on the other side was the old house left by my mother. I was caught in a dilemma. That night, I curled up at the head of the bed, tightly hugging the real estate certificate, with tears streaming down my face, constantly blaming myself. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. Your daughter is so useless. When I was in the most desperate situation, it was Jason who pulled me out of the mire. Now that he was in trouble, I couldn't just abandon him. The next day, I sold my mother's house and moved into a rental house with Jason. However, the money from selling the house was far from enough for Jason's treatment fees. Just one box of pemigatinib tablets cost 40,000 yuan, and coupled with various consultation fees, it was like a bottomless pit. For this reason, I gave up writing and took on 3 jobs. I got up early and went to bed late every day, so exhausted that I was almost on the verge of collapse, just to earn a few dozen more yuan and save up enough for the surgery fee as soon as possible. To let me have a good rest after work, Jason always went to the hospital by himself quietly. At that time, I only hated myself for being so powerless and unable to relieve his pain. Now, I felt like a clown, a buffoon being toyed with by others. He didn't let me accompany him to the hospital just because he was afraid of being found out. From the flattery of everyone, it wasn't hard to guess that Jason was either rich or noble. Although the heating in the private room was sufficient, I felt terribly cold, trembling all over as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. That one wearing a mask, don't you have any sense? Why don't you pour wine for Master Joe quickly? What a useless person. You deserve to work for others all your life. Snapping back from my memories, I stiffly poured wine for these young masters. When passing by Jason, smelling the familiar scent on him, I was momentarily distracted and accidentally spilled the wine on him. The female companion beside him immediately stood up, angrily pushed me to the ground, and pointed at me, shouting abuse. Are you blind? The clothes on Master Joe's body are worth half of your life. Half of my life? I hurriedly propped myself up and used the tissues beside me to wipe the wine stains off him. But then the woman slapped me hard and poured all the remaining wine on my head with a look of contempt. Don't you know what you are? You have neither a good figure nor a pretty face. You're not even as good as those prostitutes outside. Do you think you can seduce Master Joe like this? Everyone burst into laughter and I was so embarrassed that I wished there was a hole in the ground for me to hide in. The purple-red liquid slid down my cheeks, blurring my vision. I saw the man in the middle of the booth seem to chuckle in a good mood. I'm very sensitive to voices, and I also liked it when Jason sat on the balcony playing love songs for me with a guitar. However, at this moment, the familiar laughter sounded particularly harsh. Just as I was about to carry the tray and leave, I heard Jason's cold voice. Stop! You've offended me and still want to leave? There's no such good thing. Drink this glass of wine, and then we'll let this matter pass. With that, he pushed a glass of wine with an alcohol concentration as high as 45% in front of me. The bright color of the wine looked like poison in my eyes. I stood there, hesitating to take the glass of wine. Seeing this, a flash of jealousy appeared in the eyes of the woman who had just poured wine on me. She raised her hand, trying to slap me again, but I caught her wrist. She angrily shouted at me, "Bitch, don't be so shameless. So many people want to drink Master Joe's wine but can't. Go, hold her down. There's no one who dares to refuse me yet." Jason's voice was as cold as ice, carrying an irresistible sense of oppression. I was about to run when one of his men kicked me on the knee. With a thud, I knelt in front of the two of them. The excruciating pain made my face turn pale, and cold sweat dripped from my forehead. The dignity that I had always been proud of was now being trampled on by the man I loved the most. The bitter emotion in my heart could no longer be suppressed. The woman yanked off my mask and dug her long nails into my flesh as if to take revenge. I frowned in pain and struggled desperately. She blocked Jason's view and vengefully poured the full glass of wine into my mouth. Because I drank too quickly, I choked and my face turned bright red. I couldn't help but cough while lying on the ground, curling up in pain. I'm allergic to alcohol. Even a little bit of it could make me suffocate. After a while, my face started to feel hot and red, covered with red dots, and it became more and more difficult for me to breathe. Only then was the woman satisfied and let go of me. She then lay limply in Jason's arms, giggling. Master Zhou, would you like to come to my house tonight? I've learned a lot of new tricks recently and want to try them with you. After a while, the suffocating feeling gradually eased out. I forced myself to suppress the nausea rising from my stomach and stood up. Just as I was about to leave, I was stopped by Jason. Wait. This cufflink is my compensation. Selling it would be enough for you to live a lifetime. I looked at him quietly, trying to find a trace of familiarity on him. Unfortunately, there was none. Just as I was about to reach out to take the cufflink that symbolized my humiliation, I heard him chuckle. You're very much like my girlfriend. Even the allergy to alcohol is exactly the same. But she's not as money-grubbing as you. If it were her, she definitely wouldn't accept it. Girlfriend? How ironic. I withdrew my hand awkwardly, but there was an exquisite cufflink in my palm. The logo on it was something I had never seen before, looking extremely luxurious, something that a person from the bottom like me could never have access to, and it was also the first time I realized that. It turned out that just one cufflink was worth my whole life of hard work. I turned around and left. Before I had gone far, I heard someone ask. Master Joe, seriously, that girl sold the old house left by her mother for you. Didn't you feel a bit touched at all? Jason didn't say a word. The cigarette between his fingers flickered, and his brows were tightly furrowed, obviously a bit irritable. After a long while, he slowly exhaled a puff of white smoke and said casually with a smile, it's just a game. Why take it seriously? The woman who can make me fall in love hasn't shown up yet. Perhaps because the allergy got worse, my breathing became more and more rapid, as if I was going to suffocate and die in the next second. I thought so. It's not Master Joe's style to turn over a new leaf. By the way, Master Joe, is that girl particularly slutty and wanton that you played with her for so long? Why don't you let us have a try when you're done with her? Before he could finish speaking, Jason kicked him to the ground and picked up the beer bottle on the table and smashed it on that person's head. The flying glass fragments scratched the corner of his eye. But he seemed completely unaware, with a cold look in his eyes, as if he were looking at a lifeless object. She's not someone you can joke about. Everyone was so frightened that they fell silent, and no one dared to step forward to pull Jason away for fear of getting themselves into trouble. Suddenly, someone mentioned my name. Master Joe, stop it. You still have to go to the hospital later. You don't want Winnie to suspect anything, do you? Hearing this, Jason did calm down as expected. He signaled everyone to be quiet and took out his phone to dial my number. The phone in my pocket suddenly lit up, and the vibration sound was particularly jarring in the quiet private room. Seeing this, I quickly pressed the hang-up button and walked out quickly, but he stopped me. Wait. Instantly, my heart was pounding like thunder, and the color drained from my face bit by bit. Take off your mask. Hearing this, I froze and didn't dare to look up at him. Jason pulled off my mask without any pity and stared at my face for a long while. Fortunately, my face was so swollen that it was hard to recognize my original appearance. Your face is really disgusting. Get lost. With that he took out a handkerchief, wiped his fingers with a look of disgust, and then threw the rather valuable handkerchief into the trash can. What he threw away was not just the handkerchief, but also the last shred of my self-esteem. Before the door closed tightly, someone asked Jason what he thought of me. The corners of his lips curled slightly, and he smiled casually and said, she's just a little toy to play with when I'm bored. Watching her gradually let down her guard and fall deeply in love with you, and then pushing her into the abyss, isn't it interesting? Everyone burst into laughter and praised him one after another. I clenched the door handle tightly, trembling all over. The suffocating feeling in my chest made it almost impossible for me to stand. I really wanted to push open the door and question him loudly. Wasn't he tired of pretending for these 5 years? However, due to the huge gap in our status, I held back my impulse. He was not someone I could afford to offend. After just a few steps, everything went black before my eyes, and a dizzy feeling hit me. I stumbled into the dressing room, took out the anti-allergy medicine and hangover pills I always carried with me, and stuffed them into my mouth. I curled up in pain all by myself. Half an hour later, I was as wet as if I had been soaked in water. Sister Lee, who pushed the door open and came in, almost screamed when she saw me like this. She hurriedly ran up to me. "Winnie, are you okay?" I shook my head to indicate that I was fine. "Sister Lee, I won't come tomorrow. My friend has already left." Sister Lee was the manager of this bar. I had told Sister Lee about Jason's illness before. To help me earn more money, she specially arranged for me to work in the area where I could make money quickly by running errands. Now that I suddenly resigned, I couldn't help feeling a bit guilty. Fortunately, Sister Lee didn't say anything and just gave me a gentle hug. When I got home, I couldn't help but take out my phone to look up news about Jason. A big shot like him couldn't have left no trace on the internet. There was very little information about him, but the most conspicuous one was this: Jason, the young master of the Hong Kong city, was speeding in his car on the viaduct on a rainy night. In the attached picture, he was standing on the hood of a black Maybach with a defiant look on his face, with a beautiful woman in his arms, laughing wildly and freely. This was the real him. All my beliefs collapsed at this moment. Tears were pouring down like a flood, dropping onto my phone one by one. I couldn't help crying out loud. I suddenly remembered the first time I met Jason. He was wearing faded blue jeans, with a look of restraint and uneasiness on his face. He was completely different from the Jason in the bar who was chatting and laughing, violent and fierce. I couldn't help mocking myself. With such acting skills, it was really a pity that he didn't become an actor. Since he got sick, I had been getting up at 5 o'clock every morning to catch the subway. To save up for his surgery fee, I ate plain steamed buns with pickles every day. In the sweltering heat, I put on the bulky doll costume and humbly handed out flyers. When I met people with bad tempers, I would be severely humiliated by them. Several times, I was so tired that I almost fainted. My friends advised me to take a rest, saying that if I died suddenly one day, no one would take care of my body. I would smile and say, "Who says so? At least my Jason will take care of it," and I got a big eye roll from my best friend. At that time, I thought that no matter how hard it was all worth it, because, before I knew the truth, Jason really made me feel that he loved me very much. On their way to attend my graduation ceremony, my parents had a car accident. I blamed myself a lot. If it weren't for me, they might not have died. Because of this, I suffered from severe depression and lost interest in everything. In just half a year, my weight dropped rapidly from 125 pounds to 75 pounds, a total of 50 pounds. On the day I met Jason, I was cutting my wrist, thinking that dying would put an end to everything. Anyway, life was meaningless. Seeing my bleeding wrist, Jason panicked and rummaged through the boxes and cabinets to find a bandage to wrap it for me. I was thinking at that time, is this guy crazy? A normal person would have run away long ago when seeing such a scene. Who would bring trouble upon themselves? Because of the irregular diet for a long time, I got a very serious stomach problem. After we got together, Jason quit his job with a good monthly salary to take care of me and became a house husband. He would remind me to drink water on time every day and also remind me to have meals on time without missing any. Jason was like a ray of light shining through the darkness for me at that time. It made me want to hold on to it regardless of everything. But it wasn't until I saw a different Jason in the bar that I realized that the ray of light had never been meant to shine on me. I thought that this was also part of his game. He made me regain my confidence in life and then hit me hard again, making me experience the despair of falling from heaven to hell. Suddenly, my phone rang. I clicked on it and saw a message from Jason. "Winnie, I'm so tired from chemotherapy today. I want to have an early rest. Could you come to see me tomorrow?" There was also a cute emoji of a puppy cuddling. Only then did I remember that today was the day to visit him. Perhaps because he was injured on his eyebrow bone and was afraid that I would suspect something, he sent the message to explain. Coincidentally, I didn't want to see him either. I casually threw my phone aside and started packing my things. Since I couldn't afford to offend him, couldn't I just avoid him? Actually, I didn't have much to take. I simply packed a few clothes. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted by the ring on my hand. I almost forgot about it. I gently rubbed the ring, and my eyes couldn't help but turn red again. This was the ring that Jason had painstakingly saved money to buy for me after we got together. At that time, he had just graduated from university and didn't have much money, but for our anniversary, he secretly went to work on a construction site, going out early and coming back late every day. I knew nothing about it at that time, and I gradually became uneasy and started to be suspicious. Thinking that he might be tired of me, I was like a madman out of control, crying and questioning him, knowing that I was sick, why he still wanted to get involved with me. If I had never seen the light, I could have been used to being alone. Jason realized that he had neglected me and kept assuring me that he had never done anything to betray me. But he just refused to tell me what he had done behind my back. I was so angry that I slammed the door and left. Until the anniversary day, when he showed up with an exquisite and small birthday cake and the ring. I couldn't help crying out, "Jason, you bastard, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? You think you're so selfless by doing this, and it makes me seem unreasonable and nagging." Since I got sick, my emotions had been very unstable. I thought he would angrily throw the cake on the table and then scold me for being ungrateful and heartless. Unexpectedly, he took the initiative to apologize to me and coaxed me gently, "Winnie, I'm wrong. I won't hide anything from you again in the future." "You fool, was that why I was angry with you?" Seeing the blood blisters and chilblains on his slender and fair fingers, I half threatened and half pitied him and told him not to hide from me and do these dangerous things again. Jason said to me with a smile, "Yes, I promise to listen to my wife." Now, even though I know it was all fake, I still can't bring myself to hate him. I just want to disappear from his world gracefully. Jason really didn't lie to me. His cufflink was very valuable. I exchanged it for 3 million yuan at the pawnshop and contacted a real estate agent, wanting to buy back the house left by my parents. But I was told that the house had already been sold. I didn't have extra time to be sad. I left the ring and the remaining 2 million yuan in the rental house. On my way to the airport, I sent Jason the last message. "Let's break up. You won't in the game." After deleting all the photos we took together and the 10 gigabytes of chat records, I pulled out the phone card and threw it out of the window. I came to a small town in Yunqing, which is known as the South of the Colorful Clouds, and as my mother's hometown. Before I met Jason, I had always wanted to own a flower shop of my own. Because of his illness, this plan had been postponed for a long time. I used the money exchanged from the cufflink to take over a flower shop. After a month of hard work, the business of the flower shop gradually got better. Life was busy and fulfilling. It would have been better if I hadn't met Carlos. That day, after cleaning the flower shop, I was about to close the door when a dark figure rushed out from the dark and a cold dagger was pressed against my neck. "Help me, or I'll kill you." The man's voice was weak and trembling, carrying a strong threat. I looked up at him in horror and saw that the man was in rags, with his face full of fear and vigilance. He didn't look like a good person at first glance. I subconsciously wanted to take out my phone to call the police. Sensing my intention, the man suddenly shouted angrily, "Don't call the police." With a snap, he broke my wrist with force. I turned as pale as a sheet from the pain, and cold sweat broke out instantly. But I bit my lower lip tightly, not daring to anger the villain in front of me any further. Be obedient and help me deal with the wound. Don't even think about running away," the man said viciously. Suppressing the fear and dread inside me, I said tremblingly, "Okay, but don't do anything reckless." Biting my teeth against the severe pain in my wrist, I found the medicine box. I quickly helped the man deal with his wound. Sometimes when I accidentally pulled at his wound, the knife pressed against my neck got closer. "Are you trying to kill me with pain?" The man chuckled, sounding casual. "All right, can you let me go now?" I looked at the man with a calm expression, but my hand hidden under my sleeve had been trembling non-stop. "Go and get me a basin of water. I want to wash my face." I looked down at my wrist, which was swollen like a pig's trotter. The implication was obvious. I couldn't do it at all. The man also realized this, and his eyes darkened. Just when I thought he was going to kill me to silence me, there was another snap. I could move my hand again. "Can you go now?" He raised his eyebrows and looked at me, whistling at me like a hooligan. A face washed clean by water came into view. Only then did I realize that this man was actually quite good-looking. His messy black hair casually hung over his forehead, that he had peach blossom eyes that seemed affectionate even when looking at a dog. Every line on his face was just right, making people unable to help but look at him a few more times. The man told me that his name was Carlos and that he was from the Carlos family in the capital city and had been chased by his enemies here. It didn't matter to me who he was. What mattered was that he had the nerve to stay at my place shamelessly. To prove that he wasn't freeloading, he took the initiative to handle all the household chores. Sometimes when the flower shop was busy, he would also help me arrange the flowers and wrap the bouquets. As soon as I got home, I saw Carlos wearing an apron and poking his head out of the kitchen. "Winnie, what would you like to eat tonight? How about I make sweet and sour spare ribs for you?" "Okay." Hearing my answer, he went back into the kitchen, and soon the sizzling sound of oil could be heard from inside. At the dinner table, while I was eating, I casually asked, "Carlos, when will you leave my house?" He paused while picking up food with his chopsticks and pretended that nothing had happened. "Winnie, you're such a heartless woman, you're the scumbag. Your whole family are scumbags." I glared at him like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Perhaps my reaction was so funny that Carlos laughed until tears came to his eyes. Finally, while wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes, he whispered, "Sure enough, you're as obedient as the rumors say." His voice was very low, but I still heard it. "You're talking bad about me again." I pretended not to hear it, lowered my eyes, and continued eating the food in my bowl. Suddenly, I didn't feel like eating any more. Obedient? What kind of trick was this? Before, I just suspected whether he had been eyeing me for a long time. After all, he didn't look like a fugitive on the run, nor did he try to kill anyone. Instead, he cooked for me just to be able to stay here. All the people in the world are busy for profit. It was impossible that he was so nice to me just because he fell in love with me. It must be that there was something he could gain from me, but I was just a penniless pauper. What was there for him to covet? At night, I lay in bed thinking about Carlos's words. Was I crazy, or was the world crazy? Were these young masters so bored that they always liked to play the plot of the domineering president falls in love with me, with poor people like me? My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the ringtone of my phone. Looking at the unfamiliar number on it, I frowned and was about to hang up but accidentally pressed the answer button. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was hoarse but extremely familiar, which made me tremble all over. It was Jason. I was at a loss and was about to hang up the phone when I heard him say, "Winnie, why did you break up with me? Also, what's going on with the money and the ring at home?" His voice carried a bit of vulnerability and helplessness. I remained silent. "Why did you change your phone number? Are you that afraid that I'll drag you down?" I couldn't help but laugh angrily. At this point, he was still pretending to be innocent with me. "Jason, are the thousands of high-end dishes not delicious enough, or are the villas worth hundreds of millions not comfortable to live in? Why did you prefer to eat cheap street food with me and squeeze into the dark and damp rental house with me?" Although it was in a questioning tone, there was a crying sound in my voice. I thought I could let go of the past gracefully, but I found that I was still very unwilling. There was a long silence on the other end, and then he suddenly chuckled. "How did you find out? It's none of your business." I couldn't help but swear. "Winnie, you've become disobedient. And who gave you those 2 million yuan? Have you found a new partner so quickly?" Jason's voice was casual, but there was a hint of threat in it. I suddenly felt sad. What on earth did I do to be chosen as prey by these rich young masters? I couldn't accept that my daily life with Jason was told by him to others as a joke. Even my coquetry might just be seen as begging for pity in his eyes. "Jason, please, can you just leave me alone? I admit defeat in this game." "Can't I just admit defeat?" "But Winnie, I don't seem to want to end this game." "Then go to hell." After shouting this, I hung up the phone angrily. My mind was racing. Since Jason could get my new phone number, obviously, he already knew where I was. Without thinking too much, I packed my luggage and was about to slip away. When I went downstairs, I saw Jason dressed in a suit and sitting on my newly bought sofa. Seeing the luggage in my hand, he quickly walked towards me and grabbed my wrist with such force that it seemed he was going to crush my bones. "Do you think you can escape?" Never. I ignored him and instead looked at Carlos beside me. You told him my information. It wasn't a question but a statement. Carlos didn't dare to look at me and guiltily turned his head away. Master Gio, I've done what I promised you. I hope. I'll give your Carlos family the piece of land in the eastern suburbs. Jason didn't even look at him, and his voice was cold. I smiled, not angry at all, and looked up at Jason with a sarcastic smile. Why? It's just a game. Master Gio, how come you've fallen for me, this little plaything? Was that you that day? He looked at me in disbelief, and his voice was trembling. Otherwise? I'm sorry that I didn't let you see me crying bitterly and hugging your trouser legs. Winnie, I beg you not to talk to me like that. Jason stared at me fixedly, and the corners of his eyes became redder and redder, as if he was going to break down in the next second. In the past, this trick of his always worked on me. Now, I just felt disgusted. I looked at him with disgust. Don't call me that. You don't deserve it, Jason. You really make me sick. Carlos, who was watching the fun, had the corners of his lips slightly raised, which was particularly annoying to me. Bastard. Shameless. I pointed at Carlos and said to Jason with a smile, I've slept with him. There might already be his child in my belly. Do you still want me like this, Jason? Seeing Jason's expression as if he had swallowed a fly, I couldn't help but laugh. As I laughed, tears came out. So, Jason, who are you pretending to be affectionate for? Have you lived with me for so long that you really think you're the Jason from the slums? Carlos was frightened by my words and quickly explained to Jason. Master Gio, I swear I definitely didn't sleep with her. Even if she took off all her clothes and stood in front of me, I wouldn't react. I couldn't help but retort sarcastically, then you really have no taste. Your Master Gio liked to play around in my bed the most. It's so disgusting. You broke my hand and betrayed me. Jason's face darkened. He waved his hand, and the bodyguards behind him escorted Carlos out. Master Gio, please believe me. I really didn't sleep with her. I'm sorry. Seeing that no one paid attention to him, Carlos cursed shamelessly. Winnie, you bitch, slut, you deserve to die a horrible death. Cut out his tongue. Yes, boss. The bodyguards in black dragged Carlos away, and his shrill screams echoed outside the house for a long time, as if tearing apart the peaceful night. I looked at the calm man in front of me in horror, feeling uneasy in my heart, as if cutting out someone's tongue was just a trivial matter. Jason held my waist and forcefully carried me into the car. Jason, this is illegal. I'll call the police and arrest you. Go ahead and call. He responded carelessly, with a hint of provocation in his tone. Hearing this, without any hesitation, I took out my phone and dialed 110, only to find that there was no signal on my phone. Despicable. He had actually installed a signal jammer in the car. I was so angry that my chest heaved violently, and I cursed loudly. Jason, when did you become so despicable? Just because I dumped you, you won't let me go? Didn't you like to pretend to be poor? How can you afford to drive a Maybach now? It serves you right that neither your mother nor your father loves you. A piece of trash like you doesn't deserve anyone's love. Jason's face instantly turned pale. He grabbed my hand and complex emotions flickered in his eyes. Winnie, it was my fault before. You can hit me or scold me as you like. Please, don't leave me. At this moment, he was completely different from the cold and cruel man just now, as if he could break at any time, making people want to hug him. Unfortunately, I was no longer the Winnie who had eyes only for him. I'm afraid that if I stay with a piece of trash like you, I'll die sooner. I cherish my life. Winnie, please don't talk to me in such a cold tone. Look, this is the ring you threw away. I found it back. Jason's eyes were red-rimmed, filled with moisture. He carefully took the ring out of the velvet box and tried to put it on my finger. Looking at the hope in his eyes, I just felt it was so hypocritical and coldly slapped his hand away. The ring fell to the ground and rolled under the seat. Jason, if it's because you're unwilling to be dumped by me once, then you can dump me instead. 10 times or 100 times, it doesn't matter. After that, we'll be even, okay? For the first time, I looked at him so calmly, without resentment or any sentiment of reluctance. Jason got angry. He pushed me against the seat angrily and said word by word, "No way." Then, he pulled open my shirt, revealing a patch of snow-white skin. "You said you slept with Carlos. Then I'll brand my marks on your body inch by inch again." I struggled desperately, but my hands were tightly pinned above my head by him. "No. Don't." Tears of humiliation slid down my face and dropped onto Jason's face. He stopped his actions and gently wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes with his fingertips, murmuring softly in my ear again and again, "Winnie, I really like you so much." Feeling the wetness on my neck, I closed my eyes wearily. But what could I do? "Jason, I don't like you anymore and I don't dare to like you either. Who knows if this is your second game?" The two of them just looked at each other in silence, until we got out of the car. Neither of us took the initiative to speak. I was put under house arrest by Jason. What was even more unacceptable to me was that I was pregnant with his child. To prevent me from having any thoughts of running away, Jason wanted to tie me down with the child. Before I got pregnant, he would push open the door of my room almost every night. Each time, it was just like an emotionless animal mating activity. My depression became more and more serious. I hated this world and I hated Jason, the instigator, even more. He sat by the bed with a bowl of chicken soup in his hand, his words full of begging, "Winnie, please, just eat something." I screamed like a madwoman and raised my hand to knock over the chicken soup in his hand. The soup splashed onto his skin and it soon swelled up. But he acted as if nothing had happened and said to the butler, "Go and make another bowl." "Jason, are you crazy? I don't want to be with you, and I don't want to give birth to this bastard child." Hearing the word bastard, Jason's face turned pale for a moment, but soon returned to normal. He hugged my waist and buried his head in my knees, murmuring softly to himself, "Give birth to the child. In case I'm not around someday in the future, there will be someone to accompany you." I ignored him and buried my head in the quilt. Since I got pregnant, my emotions had become extremely unstable. I kept having morning sickness every day, and anorexia made me feel anxious, irritable, and painful. I even had the thought of taking the scissors beside me and stabbing my abdomen. If Jason hadn't arrived in time, maybe both I and the child would have died. He looked at me wearily, with deep sadness in his eyes. "Winnie, do you hate me that much? Don't you even like our child?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. I didn't want this child to be born into such a family at all. In the future, if he asked me how I met his father, was I supposed to tell him proudly that mommy was just daddy's plaything and you are the child of a plaything? How ironic. After that, Jason seldom showed up in front of me. He would only watch me from a distance and never disturb me. I thought he had finally come to his senses and that after giving birth to the child, he would set me free. Unexpectedly, what I waited for was the news of his death. Jason died. He died by shooting himself. He died because of my hatred. When I received the call from the hospital, my mind went blank. Every word the doctor said was infinitely amplified in the empty room, like heavy hammers hitting my heart one after another. The man who used to threaten me to have meals on time was gone just like that. Subconsciously, I thought he was joking with me. It wasn't until I saw his body with my own eyes that I vaguely remembered that I might not hate him as much as I thought. Before he died, Jason had called me. He asked me, "Winnie, if I had been honest with you from the beginning, would we not have ended up like this?" I didn't say anything and just felt extremely irritable. There aren't so many ifs. The beginning might have been different, but the result would have been the same. He was the favored son of heaven, a famous business tycoon in the Hong Kong city, while I was just an ordinary struggling writer. The plot of a prince falling in love with a Cinderella happening to me just felt absurd. To people in the upper class like them, the poor were just seasonings when they were bored. When they had almost dug out all the novelty from me, they would discard me like a rag. Essentially, we were just playthings for the rich. The man on the other end of the phone laughed at himself. "Winnie, I don't seem to be able to leave you. So what should I do?" I was a bit angry, thinking that he was teasing me again, and couldn't help shouting hysterically at him. "What should you do? At worst, we'll both perish. Nobody will survive. I don't seem to be able to bear your death. Winnie." He called my name over and over again, his voice gradually getting weaker, weak and powerless, but the last sentence I said to him was, "But I wish you were dead." Unexpectedly, it came true. Jason unconditionally bequeathed all his property to me. I held the square little box and sat alone from midnight until dawn. The nanny who took care of me couldn't bear to see me like this and walked up to me and said, "Madam, you haven't slept a wink all night. Go upstairs and have a rest quickly. Otherwise, Mr. Zhou will be sad too." At the end, she couldn't help choking up and looked at me with a pained expression. Hearing the word madam, I suddenly came to my senses. Madam? How ironic. Jason and I hadn't even got married. When did I become his wife? The nanny was new and didn't know what had happened between Jason and me. She naively thought that I was just a poor woman who had lost her husband. Madam, have a rest. Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about the child in your belly. Oh right, I still had a child. Now that Jason was gone, I could have the child aborted without any scruples, but why did my heart ache so much at the thought of this? It hurt so much that I could hardly breathe. With the nanny's support, I went back to the bedroom. That night, Jason didn't even appear in my dream. I guess he was also afraid to see my disgusted expression. The next day, Jason's assistant brought me his belongings. Before leaving, the assistant said to me rather ambiguously, "Madam, sir actually loved you more than you thought." I lowered my eyes, pretended not to hear his sigh, and turned around and went back to the room. There weren't many things that Jason left for me. Just a letter and a few photos of me in Yunqing. I stood on the balcony in a daze, looking at the brightly lit city in the distance. After a long while, I slowly opened the letter. It read, "My beloved Winnie, my Mrs. Zhou, please allow me to call you that one last time. Maybe it will make you very angry. But I can't help it. I just want to be willful one more time. You'll forgive me, right? If there hadn't been so many schemes in our encounter, you probably wouldn't have hated me so much. I've bought the house of your uncle and aunt in your name. I hope this will make you hate me a little less. It doesn't matter if it doesn't. I won't be able to see it anyway, ha 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 ha. After I'm gone, you must have meals on time, don't stay up late, and remember to exercise more. As for the child, if you really don't want to keep it, then don't. I really wanted to continue to accompany you, but I really couldn't bear to see you suffer so much because of me. The only person I couldn't let go of was you. I don't think I've told you about my past, and actually, there's nothing much to say. But I still want to tell you, when I was 8 years old, my mother died. She was killed by my father. I'll never be able to forget that my mother was naked and tightly hugged a man and then fell into a pool of blood. The last sentence my mother said before she died was that she wanted me to die. After she left, my father's temperament changed drastically. Because of my face that resembled my mother's so much, he began to be strict with me. My mother liked painting, so I had to learn painting too. By the way, he also required me to keep long hair. Don't you think it's perverted? When I read this, I couldn't help but think of the first time I met Jason. With his shiny black long hair and a pair of clear peach blossom eyes, he was a real beauty, so much so that people ignored his height. Keep reading. In the letter, Jason said that his father suffered from severe depression. Whenever his father had an episode of the illness, he would lock Jason in a room and do some terrible things. But after regaining his sanity, he would gently stroke Jason's face and say that he was a good boy. As he grew older, Jason's temperament became uncontrollable, and he began to try every means to escape from his father. When it came to the game of pretending to be poor, it was also because he thought that all women were as vain as his mother. As long as you had money, it would be no problem to make them do anything, even licking your toes. He really enjoyed seeing those people's miserable looks when the truth was exposed. Jason said that I was the most special girl he had ever met. I didn't care about money and was always kind to him. This made him couldn't help but want to extend the duration of the game to see if I would still be nice to him as always over time. When I read to the end of the letter, I felt a churn in my stomach and couldn't help but hug the trash can and vomit. No matter how much he said, it was still a feeble explanation in the end. I sympathized with his misfortunes, but that wasn't a reason for him to do evil. Whenever I thought that I was still pregnant with his child, I felt so disgusted that I wanted to throw up. The next day, I made an appointment for the operation in the hospital. I didn't want to keep anything related to Jason. After dealing with all these things, I booked a plane ticket back to Yunqing. On the plane, I watched the outline of the Hong Kong city gradually become blurred and turn into dense dots. All the noise and disturbances that had once made me tangled and troubled now seemed insignificant. Everything in the Hong Kong city would become the least conspicuous segment in my memory. As long as my heart yearned for the distance, I could let go of the past and move forward lightly.